We are happy to follow during the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sabiha. Brian.
Thank you, and thank you all for braving the weather and coming out today for such a great turnout. It's really a pleasure to host our friends from TESEV. Just a few weeks ago, we had a CAP delegation to Istanbul and Ankara and other parts, and they very warmly greeted us. And these sorts of exchanges that we have, both in public and in private, I think are really useful for helping understand our bilateral relationship, and I think are key. And I want to thank Michael, my colleague, for playing such an active leadership role in getting us more deeply engaged in Turkey. What I'm going to do today is offer four quick remarks. The first on the survey itself and some suggestions about next rounds of surveys to dig deeper, because the region is in a period of transition, and I think there's a lot of rich data that could be explored and then developed further. And then offer three comments on that are geared more towards bringing it towards the policy discussion. One, some commentary on the Arab uprisings, though we know that the survey was done long before the uprisings began. Second, talk a little bit about Libya, because it is the flavor of the day, and we have some senior U.S. officials working very closely with Turkey right now to try to get in alignment. And then finally make a comment about the U.S.-Turkish strategic partnership. First, on the survey, I am a big fan of survey research and stepping beyond the bubbles of foreign policy and national security discussions that often take place in the academic world and in think tanks and in government, and don't take into reference or into account where the publics are. So I think this is a very important attempt to understand a region that is in transition. And I think, you've seen the top lines from the results. What I would suggest here are three things for the next round of research, and understanding that research is expensive. It's extremely hard to do in the Middle East, very, very hard, especially in repressive countries. So take these suggestions with sort of that understanding of the limitations of this, but I actually think to delve deeper. First, the survey instrument, I think, could benefit from a battery of questions that offer other views about Turkey, or explore possible other views about Turkey and its role in the region. In the battery that Sabiha went through on agree versus disagree, you saw, the coherence of Turkey, of Islam and democracy. And Turkey's become more influential in Middle Eastern politics. It should play a bigger role. Yes or no? Do you agree? I would respectfully add also, just based on my travels in the Middle East, a series of questions that present Turkey perhaps in a negative light to test and probe the assumptions there. For instance, Turkey's relationship with regimes like Iran, Syria, Sudan, and Libya is worrisome. Yes or no? Do you agree or disagree? The deterioration of Turkey-Israel ties may make the possibility of a just and comprehensive peace in the Middle East more difficult. Yes or no? Do you agree? And I think there's a certain question in there that gets into that a little bit. The problems of press freedom that we hear about in Turkey make it less of a model for the region. Do you agree or disagree? Just to get into the nuance of Arab public opinion about Turkey, because I think there's a lot of nuance based on my recent travels to the Arab world. Second recommendation on the survey, very brief, but do a deeper dig on the demographics. As we know, this is a region of the world where about 50 to 60% of the public is under the age of 25. And as somebody who's studied survey research in graduate school, and I'm very interested in it as a tool, as I said, for policy analysis, really understanding how different segments of society. So there's a challenge when you collapse the data from 7 different countries and then add on data, which I know you were dealing with methodologically, and add on data from Iran. There's a challenge of understanding who are we actually talking about in societies that are in transition, and digging deeper in the demographics are important. Third, in terms of the language that's used, and we were actually talking about this quite a lot on our trip and then in the green room beforehand, the word model is disputed by many people, including your boss. But that's the word that was used in Arabic. And from what I've seen in research projects I've been involved with in Iraq and Egypt and other places in the previous decade, really doing a set of qualitative research questions, focus groups, in a sense, to understand what people understand the terms to mean, to delve deeper. And I assume your question of why Turkey was viewed as a model was an open-ended question, which then you had to code on the back end. It's very hard to do that. And I think teasing out in small group discussion formats, if you had the resources in focus groups in the region, would be very rich in a time of transition. 3 comments on policy and quickly. the uprisings in the Arab world are obviously the flavor of the day, and this research was conducted long before that. I think there's one key question Turkey needs to ask itself, and it's very basic. What role does it seek to play in this region? As Michael noted, the zero problems with its neighbors, it's really unclear what that means. I would submit that in a period of transition, and I do believe we're just at the start of a long and probably extended period of transition in the Middle East, what does zero problems with your neighbors mean when your neighbors are changing? You know, who are the people in your neighborhood? And what does that actually mean? And what positions do you stake out? The fact that Arab publics, a vast majority in these countries at least, see Turkey as a possible model. Again, and the reason why I think there should be other questions asked, I think when they see President Abdullah Gül in Tehran on an official visit at the same time that regime forces were tear-gassing the peaceful Green movement, it could raise some questions in terms of what is the stance